Hello? I'm trying to watch the meeting by Zoom, but no audio is coming through.
Now we can hear you.
Earl, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now. I can hear you.
Okay, we can hear you too.
All right.
Okay. Did you have anything that you need to share with the group, Earl?
I'm just interested to hear what you're saying, what people are saying on the visioning,
Okay.
and hope
Okay,
that they follow the joint development plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Earl. And thanks for being here. All right. We're gonna move on with the meeting then. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. All right. Why don't we go ahead and move into the activity that
Okay,
I'll let you introduce that.
sure. Okay, so yeah, as Patrick was saying, we're sort of transitioning out of this, these topical meetings that we've been having. And as part of that, we kind of want to just take a moment to reflect back on everything we've heard from all of the county agencies and sort of transition you guys into more of this advisory role. So today's main activity is for everyone to kind of share what your top 3 priorities are. And a lot of you already submitted the form, but we'll just go over those and share them with the group today. So the timing will kind of stick to about 3 minutes per SAC member to just briefly go over your top 3 priorities. And then after we go through about 3 people, we'll pause and have a short discussion. If anybody wants to sort of talk about what the 3 members have said, we'll pause for a short discussion and then continue on to the next 3. So feel free to be as specific as you want on any specific strategy. So if your priority is affordable housing, get specific as to how you would address affordable housing. And so, provide more incentives for, density bonuses or reduction of parking requirements or, waiving water and sewer connection fees. If you're not there, that's fine. But if you have specific ideas, feel free to share them. And then Patrick's going to be taking notes on what everyone says, just so we have kind of a visual reminder. And if somebody already covers one of your points, then feel free to kind of just, mention it, but you don't need to restate things that have already been said, but just kind of highlight any additional points you want to make for that priority. And then lastly, just kind of reminding everyone that we want to hear from everyone in the group, everyone's voice. We need to hear everyone's voice. So if you tend to be on the quieter side, we just encourage you to speak up and and on the other side, if you tend to speak a lot, just be aware of that and give everyone a fair chance to get their voice out there. So with that, does anyone have any questions before we get started? Or
it's really just an opportunity to kind of help put a bow on some of the information and all that we're processing and we're going to be processing. But
Okay. You want to start? So no,
Not
then?
really, but
Okay.
if you want me to. Sure. But, and so mine wasn't really necessarily the initiative, but I think the effect, more so the effect with some of the strategies we're looking at. So I think I brought up last time, the public safety effect, traffic has been a big concern. You know, we are, I want to say endorsing or, but we're bringing up these great ideas for development, but at some point, like, I guess the data that, hey, what do we already have and what can we sustain, I think is an important discussion to have. So the top three for me, I think I've shared with some of you, I have very young children that hopefully will be in the community for a long time. My youngest being 9 months, just a little bit about me, but so public safety, traffic, schools, and then the recreational facilities for us, what we can sustain in this region while still making it, you know, having these other initiatives. I'd like to not lose sight of that.
okay,
And then this sustainability overall, in the sense that it is great to have these initiatives and ideas, but how realistic is it for county government to support, you know, and for instance, I'll say, you know, these walkable communities, it's great, but we have existing, you can go down River Road or Forest Drive, and we're not maintaining what we currently have. So we're expanding, and that's great, but what about the existing communities that are out there? The county can't support that now if you go asking for repairs or things like that. Sustainability.
So kind of from like a maintenance
Yes,
perspective in terms of public facilities and
Yeah.
and roadways and that. Okay.
Adding to that, when you say traffic control and talk about infrastructure now, so I don't know how much they planned in the past for growth. Now we are now planning for 2040, which I hear them saying. And it's an awful lot to consider. Like, if you don't know that right now we can sustain what we're doing, maintain what we're doing. How can we change that just without comments? So how will the infrastructure change? I took one word before the word two. How will it need to? How will it need to change? Okay.
okay.
Yes. And it sounds good here, but unless we have the understanding of what it requires to build the infrastructure, change. It's for us to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, my top three, transportation or transit, specifically making our communities more walkable and bike lanes, access to public transit. I live in Riva, so across the South River Bridge, and we have a lot of really great sidewalks on Riva Road, but there's just, you know, my husband actually works in this complex and he can't ride his bike here because there's no safe way for him to get over the South River Bridge, and you know, there's just no designated bike lane in certain areas. I know that's something the county's working on this. So I'm really excited to see, you know, how that plays out. But that's one priority I have. The second would be housing, specifically affordable, making sure we have affordable housing in our community. I have a young family, but I have elderly retired family members, and they unfortunately can't afford to move here to be closer to us, just because it's not affordable for them. So I was really curious to hear when we had the spokesperson from the Department of Aging a few months back. I thought that was really interesting. I want to make sure that's incorporated. And then finally, environment, protecting our natural resources. We're a pretty developed region, I would imagine, compared to others, but making sure that the natural resources that we do have that are still untouched remain untouched, preserving our, you know, are priority for us. I think it's really critical. So not sure exactly what the solutions are, but those are the things I see that need to be addressed. That's urgently.
Sure.
So I guess mine would all go on the premise that all the natural resources are sustained.
Okay.
But then with that, I really want us to become an age-friendly community. And within that, there would be that missing middle housing, so to really look at the way the housing is not currently conducive to people who work in the community. You know, I look at the food servers, I look at all the help wanted signs, and I think you're not gonna get these people if you can't give them housing in the community. I read one very interesting thing. I was reading a lot of stuff about areas that are working on all of this. And in one area, they're giving developers $50,000 per unit for redevelopment of units that aren't currently terribly habitable. And that's like a forgivable loan if they don't raise their rents more than 3% a year for 15 years. So, I mean, it's that kind of innovative stuff that I'd like to look at.
Did they, if I could interrupt, did they talk about how that was funded? That's something.
I have to do more for the reading. I do.
That's for you.
There's a lot of really innovative stuff that's going on. So zoning for,
Can I ask you real quick, was that for rehabbing or, okay,
yeah, rehabbing houses, yep. And zoning for dense housing in areas with transportation. You know, the mixed income, multifamily housing, creating an age in place community, you know, lots of aging in place communities. Again, and I've said this on the Zoom calls that, you know, we segregated, you know, the 50 plus and the 55 plus and the families, and people need to be able to age in place. So that's a real priority. Another thing I read about was looking at parking, because parking is always an issue. How do you have dense housing and not have parking? And one of the ideas was to partner with private parking lots, you know, where people aren't using the lots during the day, or they aren't using the lots during night, and then the public could have access to those parking lots, so that you have the lots and they're always fully utilized. And more mixed use, again, especially in the mall areas. I would love to see the Westfield Mall become a mixed use mall. Lots and lots of housing around it, in it, above it. Some areas to permit 100% lot coverage. So that, you know, instead of wasting half a lot on grass or 3/4 of a lot on grass, you take those lots and you just allow for more housing on them. And again, this would all be without cutting down trees and altering the makeup. So those are my priorities.
So kind of focusing on redevelopment then too, is it? Okay. All right.
can you all read my handwriting, okay?
Not bad.
Do we want to pause for discussion? Does anyone want to ask any questions or add anything or?
Just what all we've discussed for several months. How are we going to keep the same? What's the word? The town center has what the highest, but 15 stories or 12. And are we considering landmass? Can't keep going out. They have to go up. So are we considering how to use our landmass? And
What's the, I don't know, the specific height limit allowances in parole? Is it 12? Is it, can you get up to 12, Patrick?
You can get up to 16.
Up to 16? Yeah.
I don't think, gosh, off the top of my head, I don't think those are 16 quite.
I thought it was, I thought ones that we were buying initially were 15. I thought
I
then
should know that.
once you rent for 12, I'm not sure. I know the city of Annapolis only has, it's very limited, very limited.
Well, and it's only a limited area in parole that you could actually achieve that height under certain conditions, but
Yeah, the parole, I don't know if you looked into the parole town center plan, but there's the core area in the parole, they kind of designate the parole area for, certain areas can go up to, like 16, and that's the core area, which is kind of where that Annapolis Town Center area is. It's not Westville Mall is not the core, it's
No.
the.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but yeah.
it's kind of second.
Gentleman back here, you can't speak up. It says, he said, building up with incentives.
Incentive.
Yeah.
Right,
Yes.
right.
I'll keep quiet.
No.
I'm not supposed to speak. I'm only.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll, in the break.
Put your hand in my back.
Okay. Patrick knows incentive.
Do you want me to introduce him?
Oh, let me tell you who I am. I mean, my name is Richard Israel. I'm a member of the Arundel County chapter of the Maryland Building Industries Association. And so I attend almost all the regions, and I'm going to tell you, Patrick, Eric does that on a computer and doesn't have to write it on a wall. And it makes it a lot easier for people to see what you're doing. But
I decided to go.
okay, go on.
I've done that.
We're very involved with the redevelopment idea. Current administration says that they're very interested, but need to wait after the election. To work on taking areas that have fully impervious area, being able to get incentives, not 100%, we love that, but that's, you'll have too many people arguing against the landscape manual, but incentivizing redevelopment of existing impervious area for mixed use, residential, and so we're looking at those kinds of things, but I'm really here to observe, and I'm not, don't want to step on anyone's. But I've been going to all the regions. It's very interesting, educational on the difference for your region.
Thank you. Yeah. Good to see you.
Okay,
Let's, why don't we continue? Troy, do you want to talk about what some of your key priorities for the project?
Is, the integrity of established neighborhood. Got it. All, really develop, particularly with, seniors. If it could be some kind of, and I know there probably is a credit program for seniors to keep their home under the Department of Aging, but to make it more easily accessible, especially for seniors, because it is not online. A lot of these seniors don't have access for the computer knowledge to actually go through the process. Also with a tax incentive for property tax for the same. I know the cap for earned credit is like $60,000 or something, but I think it should be adjusted for a lower rate. Also, the transportation piece. Well, I'll change that more of security for residents. As far as talking today about the traffic and all these renovations developed in our area, how will that affect the established neighborhood that's already in existence? As far as transportation, security, safety fees.
When you say safety, you mean because there's larger development around the smaller communities
Yeah,
will be
Well,
have
it'd be-
safety concerns because there's more traffic?
there's more traffic, and well, but not only traffic, but foot traffic. Particularly like where I live at, particularly out West Gate, is nighttime foot traffic. We had the sidewalk and it's great during the day, but at nighttime, we do have challenges with, like homeless and people walking up and down, invading our properties. our church, I'm a trustee at the Fowler's Church, and we struggle with that. They come in, set up camp, even the cemetery. And we try to deter it with lighting, but I think we need more involvement with the public facility, like the police department being involved, or setting up more cameras that will be the responsibility of the police department. I mean, to watch and to, make sure that our communities are safe. With all this, development going around, a lot of us, and I'm speaking particularly with my community, there's real boxed in, great incentive with, and I'm support the multi-use development and green spaces and all that kind of stuff. But with that, it increases more people in our area that's, where we've already been established.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Speak up later. I mean, that's the whole point of tonight is, as we go through this, more ideas are going to come forward. So
what would you do in a situation like what just being described, that assuming that there is redevelopment or at the mall, and that there are some existing communities on Westgate Road that are approximate that remain, that would have a tendency to drive up land values, which would put pressure on taxes and real estate taxes. So somehow, if in fact it's important, which I believe it is, to those communities, some balance. So I'm not proposing anything. I'm just kind of thinking a lot, because that's probably usually what the lane economics would be, right? Unless intentionally that area is left lower zone, so you can allow this, there'd be a bright line, so to speak, in terms of zoning around the mall, so that the existing communities tax.
To be a priority for us, is make sure that we're not displacing, existing older communities and communities who live there.
It's easy to see how
Live
that.
there, but stay there.
It's easy to see how that.
Well, and also, I think what you were saying, that the design of the newer complexes, you're saying there's more traffic, especially in the evening. Is there a way that there could some guidelines as to development setbacks or lighting, or some type of open space between older neighborhoods and the newer development that could be monitored? Just take security and safety into mind when those are laid out.
Like a pre-engineered, some sort of engineered solution to maintain the identity of
Like a framework. Say, come into this is what you have to
But a
do.
lot of times you don't see the after something.
Exactly.
But the other half of that is having we don't have a very good program for homeless people here. We have the Lighthouse Shelter, and so you can set up all kinds of security, but that doesn't eliminate the problem of the homeless people.
Oh, I thought that, yes, you're absolutely right. That would be a solution for that population. I think it was more protecting the older community.
You have to do both. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's.
all part of
Protect the old community.
A facility for those. There's a camp right behind our best gate already, that's getting established. We had a few behind where I live at, but, it'll stay for a while, but the one that's behind, it's behind the new housing on best gate next door to the medical facility, going the back of those houses back there. It's far away and all that. I really didn't even know it was back there until recently. But depending on how large you get, some of those homeless camps are you know, they keep things clean, they're tidy, they don't disrupt the community, but, you know, it all depends on the situation. But in order to alleviate that, that's something maybe to, even with all this development, I mean, we do have the lighthouse shelter. The lighthouse shelter is always, like, you know, is one development. It's definitely not enough for the third.
We didn't really get a talk that spoke to the homeless population. Did we? That might be interesting to see what the advocates for that community could offer, so we can benefit.
So when we, in our community, we had the old Annapolis golf course, and when it was redeveloped into athletic fields for Key School. So it changed the use, and Nestor came in to explain that, you know, from Public Works, to explain that when something of that nature happens, there's a new formula for adding streetlights. And he was telling everyone what they're going to be like, and that they're two different heights, and all. It's pretty much cookie cutter type of thing. You got this or you got that. And the community, folks who lived on that road, on Carrollton Road, said they didn't want it. And they were adamant that they did not want the additional streetlights because of the light pollution. And so we can sit here and think that that's the best possible thing for that community, is give them additional lighting because it's safety, but it may not be what they want. So we have to take into consideration some possible way of the community having a voice.
Oh, absolutely.
They have to have the, and you would think, I mean, you would think that more street lights, safer, that'd be great. But I mean, we had a huge community vote, and
Larry, why don't we
So
hear from you?
I have some of the similar concerns that they express in terms of affordable workforce housing. I'm not even talking about those mostly, that's not entirely different, but in terms of having zoning to be able to encourage that, whether it's through some kind of density incentives, changes in setbacks, coverage, or assuming data supported, lower parking, ratios. And Patrick, and as you and I was talking about this, it's not, what you're saying is, if I'm able to build X market rate, I'm not getting a density bonus. I'm thinking about building more X market rate. Essentially, I'm getting the density bonus. I'm getting enough of a density bonus to support building a bunch of whatever target there is that the county has. So that's one. And again, as others have said, be consistent with that, both the county and the development people be able to work together to make sure those areas have the roads.
EPF, is that, adequate public facility?
Yes, sorry.
No, is there, right, is there a specific, are there specific facilities that fall under that definition, or is it just whatever? Like, is there a specific definition for adequate public facilities? Like, is it schools, roads? What falls under that?
Fire and police, right?
Fire and
Fire.
police.
Water, utilities.
Yeah, if you're a builder, the county's fairly well developed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what it's.
Yeah.
So it's not for up for interpretation. There's like a formula for, okay.
Well, it is under review, so.
Yeah, it is.
Can
Yeah.
be.
Okay.
And I just want to say this without personal, and it was both. One, because I've been on the school board for 5 years. And our budget was almost half of the counties, but, right? When you talk about adequate public facilities, you talk about what sounds right, but then you talk to the politics of what you want. If the greater number of people don't want something, even though it should be, you won't have it. So while we're talking, everything we're saying, just understand, being realistic, you're being in a advisory capacity, but it may not mean squat. I don't mean to be negative, but just hear what I'm saying. Everything we're talking about right now is for the idea of 2040. Off of Forest Drive, I know this is in the city. Most people don't even know there's a housing development off of now that's Snake Road being built. Elder Charles James, who was on the committee, lives on it, he did get into that street. And so if they're told up here to do something, and the community is not aware of it, it's going to be done. So let's be realistic about what we're asking for, and also what all we're doing is advising. So when powers that be come together, the things we're asking for and talking about, and spend all this time on, may not happen. But when I said infrastructure, hit the nail right on the head by talking about water and sewer. How old are they in the city? Like the person in Baltimore, places like that. Have they planned for what's happening right now? And is this plan going to be upgraded? We talk about buku bucks for all this to happen. The simplest things that seems they should take place will not, because the powers that be see politics over what we're talking. Sorry to say it.
That's
It
why
is what it is.
we're a community group that's supposed to be assisting on
Yeah,
better
I know,
planning of
I know.
infrastructure.
I know.
And it does take a long time to get the public
Well,
infrastructure.
And to piggyback off of what you're saying, where, I mean, ideally, this group is going to formulate strategies, you know, addressing these things. And then ideally, we're going to put it out to the public and either have support for, you know, some of these strategies or hear otherwise, or strengthen them, or what have you. So it ideally, the plan is going to go to council with that behind it, a whole lot of voices beyond just ours here. So. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it was more of like a technical question, like, is it something that like I said, is there a clear definition of what that is or not? And
It's
so-
almost actually, it's a,
Yeah,
Sorry, I don't know the code as well as some other people in the room.
well, but also the difference between the cities, APF, and the counties should be addressed, because it's not the same.
Which is why you see the development.
And the county development of parks, they do not have to look at the APFs.
City access to recreational opportunities is a big part of it. In the city.
It would be nice if they were aligned. That's something we're striving to task force.
Larry, let's let you finish your thoughts too.
As others said, transportation level. One is for those who have cars, be able to try to find ways to take trips off the road as best as you can. Going to big miracles over here, but there are some things about, you know, transportation hubs that we know we've talked about, or having, you know, kind of even more remote lots, parking ride lots. Assuming you get transportation from that community. When it's
The commuter,
yeah, community destination. If somebody's having to change trips 3 or 4 times, you know, no one's going to use that way, except, you know, those who can't afford anything else. You know, so that's one kind of part of it, and then the other part is for those who don't have access in those communities that may have limited access, to be able to help make connections through transportation. I know we have a bunch of bus routes that we've looked at, but 2 important locations, whether it's, you know, workplaces or even places for services, healthcare, groceries, et cetera.
Anything else?
I
Or
have a question. We're talking about developers. What's required? Are they required to create a certain amount of parks, a certain square footage of parks or whatever, based on a certain number of parks?
green space, open space, that kind of thing with the developments, yeah.
So at
Those are
what
spelled
point,
out.
at what, is there a certain number of houses or properties that they build when, before they're required to do that?
It's dependent on the zone that they're in, and then parole, because it has a whole overlay structure, it's a little bit different in parole, but it's depending on, it's spelled out in the zoning code. How that,
It's kind of different all over the place based on different criteria.
yeah, it's tied to,
Is that something that we can review and comment on?
But from a practical standpoint, unless the development has scale, which a lot of them do, hundreds and hundreds. The majority of whatever open space, breakfast spaces provided is largely protected. That's not to say that it's excluding it, but it doesn't serve a broad. Unless at some point you have such a large.
But every developer is required to, maybe not access the park and recreation facilities, but Forest Conservation Act. And in Arundel County, they're required to serve a certain amount of acreage.
Right, that's a whole different thing.
Gotcha. Okay, you're talking more about the recreation.
Yeah, I mean, where I lived before, and I won't say where, it's been doing it, but the developers in every single community, you have 50 houses, you had to have a park. I mean, it's just, that had to be part of the community, and they had to have walking paths and stuff. But the parks were in fact open to anybody in the park.
Right.
Changes with infill development now, because the developer's gonna say, why, I mean, I'm just things here, so why would I try to put a park in? That doesn't make economic sense to me. And that is an argument that gets accepted.
That's
and
exactly what they would say.
who contributes to the public space.
Totally.
Because eventually the infill, and that's where we're headed, we're just gonna start infilling and that excuse all these public entities for the infill development.
Oftentimes the ratio is related to the size of the parcel being developed, so bigger parcels have to provide more open space, and more opportunities for recreation. Developments have a smaller footprint, so and the way the code is written is less severe.
Exactly,
So
but
I'm not
if
sure
you
that's bad. I
put
think it's just
5
how it is.
small infill, I mean, we're gonna move towards more infill development. So everybody's gonna argue that their impact is not enough to have to provide for these recreational facilities, but yet 5 infill developments is significant to. That's exactly what I'm saying. Going to change because we're built out. So how could we ask for assistance, or is that even the way to do it? Ask to improve public infrastructure. How does that get done? Moving forward.
That touches one of the things that I wanted to bring up, and some of the research I've been doing with different affordable developers nationwide. And there's actually a great piece in the New York Times this last weekend, literally going through the cost of affordable housing. I was reading it right now from an audit from LA. The average cost to literally to meet all of these issues we're talking about, you have developers do this, meet this environmental requirement, $600,000 per affordable unit. Nearly double the market rate cost. So, and then it gets into time, like 3 to 5 years per unit versus 1 to 2. So that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to look at is we have this incredible set of Venn diagrams through here, right? And where they meet is at $600,000. This doesn't. 5 years.
if it's all put upon the developers to take care of concerns that. these have.
But who else? I mean,
Well, I don't know,
expect
that's what I'm
to
asking.
fund the-
You're saying 600,000 per unit?
Think about everything we're asking. Now multiply it by California. So that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And the next thing, what are you doing?
No, I'm just thinking, that this is to provide affordable.
Yeah, so they built 3,357 units. They have, they did a full audit. You know, because the other thing that this kind of ties to a little bit is one of the things I want to look at is, can we have a fast track approval process?
Okay, well, that's another.
If you agree to do this, then you can't get held up for 3 to 5 years, because there's a real cost to developer investment capital to sit there and continually go back to boards and commissions. And one way I was wondering that if Pat, you and Desiree could help us, is can we see case studies in the county of larger affordable projects? Like we're in a case study. Here's when they first talked to you guys. Here's the whole development process. Here's when they got their certificate of occupancy. And like, let's look at that and understand, because I think the only way we can improve our process is to understand what happens conventionally right now.
What you were saying is now, what state was that? California.
That's California. In LA.
That article was in this New York Times, you said.
Yeah, I sent it to you guys.
Yeah, I got it. 2 days ago, you said?
On Monday, yeah. It's right there. It's a title about the wrong way to solve the homeless
Well,
problem.
could you send that to them?
Okay, I have it all. Sure.
It's a fantastic piece. It really makes you realize, like,
California is not the place to look at best practices.
well, exactly. It's great to know.
This is good. I think what they must do.
Yeah. So I was hoping we could see a case study, like pick some larger developments that have worked in the county. Let's go back through. I know the city of Annapolis has something called Track It, which is incredibly easy to use and fantastic. I love it.
We're working on it.
I mean, the county, so maybe you can summarize, for us, like a case, so we can kind of see like how a project works. The other thing I wanted to understand, just from my understanding, is I was really, I'm sure the right adjective, surprised at the meeting by Kai about the schools. And it kind of came out that the schools were, I'm not going to say intentionally reporting wrong about capacities. But what I took away from that meeting is that there could have been more affordable and denser development that was rejected based on the knowingly false information. And I wanted to better
He was just saying.
understand,
Calculated.
school, the density,
It was just.
but they've been doing it for 13 years.
No, it was, yeah, so it's how you count class, what counts as a classroom. I had a situation many years ago where we gave our money to build a school, and 5 or 6 years later, nothing ever happened, and said, show us how you use our money, and they couldn't. And so there, I'm not saying it was overtly intentional, but the question is what constitutes a schoolroom, because that's usually largely what it is. And if you sit there and you say, well, this is an administrator for not a schoolroom, then that changes things. So if in fact that actually materializes what he talked about, and again, I can't imagine the politics on that in terms of what will happen, that is a fairly fundamental change in terms of adding public facilities, in terms of, of changing the barrier for APM.
I mean, that was a huge, I wanted to better understand
Yeah, I
that
think
session.
it would be nice.
Because
if we could
it
go
sounded
into
like
that.
they rejected density years ago at lower building costs. That could have been done. And now we're building it at 50% higher building costs. There's a real cost in between that. I want to better understand that. And then the only thing else I have is just better understanding the current existing zoning areas. Like that one map that we always refer to that shows where higher density is encouraged. And just really understanding, can we have any impact on that, for instance?
I'm sorry, what?
That one map that shows like higher density is better in North County
Yeah,
and West County in parole. It's kind of like those are your 3 areas. That's kind of it. And how does that actually mix with our work in this county, travel, I mean, where people live and would be, and if it's even realistic or not.
Well, you have to look at what the city is planning to do, because it just, what the city's planning to do runs right through the spine. So you can't ignore what they're sorry. You have to define it.
It's a great point. Could we get Derek to present?
He did. That was-
Yeah.
He presented it like to go into like more detail of what they're doing and then how it intersects with what we're thinking of the county.
What are the big plans the city has?
They want to upzone that Bay Ridge Shopping Center, Hillsmere Shopping Center, up at where Taylor and, well, you know, at their first round, they wanted to go 4 to 8 stories in Bay Ridge and Hillsmere. At the intersection of Forest Drive and Tyler, wanted to upzone that, and then Chickapin Round Road. That was another spot that they had a category. It's called Village Center.
That was in the Eastport.
Well,
Forest Drive
it was the Forest Drive
sector.
sector study and the first round of their city comp.
Okay,
Now they're revisiting that. They have not released current. They scrapped all of those terms about a year and a half ago and up the new terms. But the philosophy is still going to be the same. So we just need to understand where they want to do that.
I mean, nationwide, there's this huge move away from single family zoning. Assuming you've ever seen articles.
Right.
In one simple way, like I know personally, we have some missing middle housing. I was talking about some properties that are like, so the lot limit might be 3,500 or 4,000, right? In this part 3 or our zoning, and this lot might be like 6,900. So I can literally have plenty of space to drop more missing middle housing, but I'm short by 200 square feet.
And that could be a zoning issue. There's no reason that we can't have that zoning change.
But what a lot of cities are just doing are saying, hey, let's just cut the lot sizes in half. Right, because if you look at some of these lots that are around Annapolis, like 3,500 square feet, it's huge lots. And so you'll have like a single small house on a 7,000 square foot lot. Can't subdivide and get to. Or add units. That, who knows if that's, I mean, there's nothing quick in the city, right? I mean, anything's going to create a set of city council meetings. But maybe it's another way just to incrementally add.
I mean, that land has, you don't have any trees on it. There's nothing environment, there's no negative environmental impact. That's where you put the dense housing.
Some people,
Sounds obvious to us.
I think it's a great idea.
Yes, to a point. I mean, you also bring in, I mean, what the concern is that also brings in a lot of folks that are gonna have cars. It is, unless there's public transportation. And if there's no public transportation plan, then there's gonna be a lot more cars.
They all have to go hand in hand. But the place that I would
Exactly.
start changing the zone is where you have the transportation. So, near the mall, again, we have transportation hub for you. Start there. And then, as the public transportation improves throughout the county, then you can move it to
But
different
who's
places.
planning? I guess we're talking a lot about. I keep going back to benefits of public infrastructure. And who's planning that? Should be the planning department. We're talking all about how we're gonna plan what the developers do. But Tony's right, a lot of times developers figure out a way to get around that, or somehow there's. Who knows how it happens? Communities perceive it as developers are getting regulated. And I'm sure that's not true, and so I'm glad we're gonna have these discussions, understanding what you struggle with, because to us, it seems like, I think of 1901 West Street, which is supposed to be a huge affordable housing complex. And didn't happen. So what happened there?
I
That's
mean, one
what
thing
we
in
need
the
to
county that we talked about is that the county and parole did not require any affordable units. It's crazy.
And then there's
Here we
another
use all
workaround,
those-
I don't think if it's a senior living, it has to have affordable congregate care, doesn't
We don't have to meet APF for schools.
So-
Right.
But there's all these things happening, and a lot of developments going on in Forest Drive. A lot of development, no affordable
Come
housing.
down River
But
Road.
yet that's all everybody's talking about is affordable. So why aren't all these developments requiring? So there's a lot of disconnects that I hope we can.
Like the way other regions deal with this, right? Or West California is you get a fast track approval. If you have like 20%, you have 30% affordable, you get a faster track. It's just like you pull forward and reduce public comment by the more.
And that's in the zoning, written into the zone.
Yeah.
In certain areas. But going back to, if there's infill development, that makes a lot of sense. But who's planning the public transportation? The developers want to get done, and you're hearing, these guys are looking at 5-year window is almost too long for them. But in the public planning process, 5 years, you barely get out of conceptual design on utilities.
What's the timeline for the transit?
They're in design now. For the,
Okay,
for the,
is that gonna be 5 years or is that gonna be?
Yeah.
they budgeted for, I think that they budgeted to start construction, but off the top of I've recently saw the design plans. I couldn't tell you if they're 65% design plans or what, but they're
Do they have
moving
a
toward,
goal for completion?
they do, yeah, like, yeah,
2023, 2025?
they're pinning me down. I don't know.
How long?
November 2nd, 2024.
That would be good
I
to
don't
know.
know specifically.
How long have they
Let's say
been planning that for a while?
2018 was when the
We're already 4
facility
years.
study.
And what did you say the goal was? What's the date?
I
No, I thought you said a date.
did because you're pinning me down, but I'm not precisely sure the date. But it is in process. I mean, there's capital money behind it. So, in the next several years, yes, they're hoping to have a,
Several.
yes. the
See,
next
so
couple
that's
of
to my
years.
point. These guys, they would say, that's too long. We're going to come in and get done and move on. We're still designing to catch up with developments that.
I know, in my fantasy world, I was thinking maybe like in the next year or two. But it doesn't.
No, I think they'll break ground, yes. The next year or two.
Maybe 2024.
Let's move on. Leo, what are some of your priorities for this?
I just wanted to follow up on something that I was talking about.
Okay,
It's adequate public facilities, schools. That's a real barrier to provide more housing, particularly for this. As there's demand for school space. Brackets that you can't build them if I don't have adequate public facilities for schools. As a developer, I can't build schools, right? Could, if I had enough scale, but don't. The county is allowed in some areas targeted growth that is allowed to sidestep that. So that's been a cutout for some developments. That seems a little unfair to me, but shouldn't get out of jail free card if you're trying to do that. But again, it's a tricky one as the developer isn't providing the schools, the school boards make those decisions about classrooms. And as we heard from our friends in education, like sometimes they're building schools where we don't really need to have that demographics needs met. That's a real disconnect. It's part of the things that I'm hoping that we can address. Really the cutouts, I mean, I know you want to develop there, but let's make sure we got it all coming together.
And this is an area I really don't know about. So does the county have county-owned properties that they're envisioning will be schools in the future, and so therefore, whether the population supports it or not, they may want to put a school there because they have bigger property.
I don't think that's quite how it works.
Okay, so that we don't have that.
Isn't it you can correct through capital improvement, right, through existing facilities where they'll rebuild the school and expand and grow?
Okay, but so in other words, they don't look at a particular area in the county and say, oh, you know what, if we buy this because it's going to be built in the future, we buy this and we have the location for the school when you need it, because that doesn't.
Well, there's a new school that I think is under construction across from Archbishop's Spalding, and I think that's a public school, right? When you think about where that is, that's a pretty suburban environment. So it's an old model where, you know, you're building infrastructure in a place that's kind of largely green.
Leo, can you speak up just a little?
Sure. So we're just talking about the old middle school that's going in across the highway from Archbishop's Spalding. You know, there's a school right across the street, right?
Right.
Private, right? But when you look at availability of seats, there's available seats, whether you can make one or not, that's a different story. But my point is, the county is building a school in a spot that is largely a suburban environment. You just wonder, like, talking about trying to address transportation needs, you know, everybody's going to drive to that school. Nobody's walking, or very few kids are walking to that school, and you wonder, why is that the place? Why is that the spot? Who's decided that that's, and it's the old zoning thinking, like, you know, we'll put it here and we'll bring everybody in. So I really worry about that, because you're going to continue to have this overlapping web of transportation needs that, you know, are being ignored.
Yeah,
Being
that's a
ignored.
very good point.
And I think that's really a failure. But anyway, the things that I'm most interested in is, I think public transportation is a real failure in the country, and especially so here in Anne Arundel County, particularly for low-income families where, you know, they rely on public transportation because they don't have a car. So I think, you know, improving public transportation, I think it has to do with safer, more comfortable bus stops that are well lit and feel secure, more of them in places where there's need. You know, I don't want to ride by broken down bus stop in a low income neighborhood, and that's like, that's not an experience I think is appropriate. So I think,
Leo, are there any other models in other cities where you take advantage? Because we all know that buses are not utilized at high percentages.
not
Can
here.
we save money by literally spending on like an Uber or a similar service
Well, I
to
think,
help these communities?
I think that those are available, and people are looking at that aggressively right now. You know, how smaller opportunities for transportation that are able to service these spread out things that only have small need. But it goes back to this infill development. There's enough people in a spot, then there's a reason for the bus to go. So that's just my opinion. So improved bus service and special attention to low income communities. That's one. I think more low and mid income housing opportunities in this community is a real important part of what we're doing. And so what does that mean? Well, to me, it means that suburban development patterns do not meet that. Can't, because it's too expensive. Apartments can do those things. Group communities can do those things. So I think we need to be looking at where those would be appropriate. And I'm not saying everywhere, but there are places I think where we can fit those in, particularly as infill, which is already somewhat of a walkable neighborhood. You have to walk to the store and get things. That, I think that's something to focus on. So mixed use developments are part of that, to provide more walkable communities, and then drive development to urban centers to reduce sprawl and the demand for people to make vehicle trips. So I think you have to start. Anne Arundel County is I mean, in Annapolis in particular, these are communities people are drawn to. So if you're going to put more people here, the urban sprawl mentality is just, it's not going to work. It's not helping. And it's driving traffic issues. So, you know, people were closer to things they could walk to. I mean, it's a European model. You go to any small city and people walk everywhere because it's convenient. Improved bike infrastructure. I mean, one of the things that would help reduce traffic, you know, people could ride their bikes more safely and securely. So, as in Europe a couple of weeks ago, you know, everyone talks about, I guess it's Amsterdam, where, you know, everyone rides bikes and you have all the pictures of the bikes. Well, when I went to Bordeaux. Bordeaux is like the second most bike-friendly town in Europe. I didn't even know that. But there's bikes scooting everywhere. You know, I mean, at 5 or 6 at night, there is bus traffic and there is car traffic, but the bikes are supported and encouraged. We're not there yet, but I mean, that's a path the rest of the world is on that we're not on. So I think that's a real place we can focus. Some of these places have dedicated bike lanes, stoplights. It's awesome. And then-
Brooklyn, New York is.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a big.
Where was that? New York?
Brooklyn, I
Oh, okay.
Okay. So you just think like, you know, people with a lot more problems than we have are figuring it out. So I think we ought to be focused on, because it would really alleviate a lot of traffic. When you think about it in the city, you can ride your bike everywhere. I had to go down to City Hall today. It was a nightmare. Schools are getting out at 3. There's no parking because the garage is gone. I said, oh gosh, this was a really bad idea.
You drove from Eastport?
I did.
Which
I mean, it's a half hour walk in the middle of like this. It's 5 hours, it's 55. How many, sorry, hang on. Yeah, and I say these things because I know.
Uber got a scooter.
I thought about an Uber, and if I'd have planned better, that would have been a great choice. Sort of been a car trip. The scooter would have been. And then the last one I had here, I know this is for, look at changing the current zoning classification system that separates uses. Where we have, you know, this is a office community, and this is a housing community, and this is retail community. And look at creating mixed use zones to support live, work, play environments.
Yeah.
So it'd be awful nice if you could get up in the morning and go to work without getting in a car, and you could go to the store without getting in a car, and you could go to the park without getting in a car. We're lucky in Eastport. I have it. Like I can do that myself, except I didn't go to town today that way. But I do go to work that way. When I walk to work, I can walk to the places I eat, I can walk to the shopping center. But that's what I'm hoping we can start to look at as like when we're thinking about where we're going to provide opportunities. That's what drives, I think, quality of life that we all want. People want to be in Eastport because it has that.
And Leo, I think you make a really great point, and the frustrating thing for me about where I live in Riva is that technically I could walk to, or my family could walk to their work, my son's daycare, to stores. I mean, geographically, it's not the distance, it's the infrastructure, there's just no infrastructure
There's
there.
not a safe way to do it. There's no
Right,
sidewalks.
exactly.
It's like what we talked about Forest Drive, you know? You wonder, like, I'm driving by the high school, and it's literally like a 2-foot wide dirt path. Right. And I'm thinking, my goodness, like, that is low hanging. Why is that not?
Well, I want to make a comment about the bike path or bike paths. I mean, we desperately need them. There are so many streets several, I don't know how many streets in this county that have a bike sign drawn in a lane, a driving lane, and say that the bicyclist is a bicycle lane and the bicyclists have the right way with the cars. So you're driving down the road and there's somebody on a bike and there's a 10-car pileup behind them. It's so dangerous. I mean, easily somebody could just get killed, and I'm sure they do all the time.
It's almost a disservice to have it because most drivers don't. understand.
Absolutely. And the other thing in this county that really, or state that cracks me up is that most of these roads have a double yellow line. And the law says that you have to move over 2 feet from the bicyclist. So the bicyclist in the lane, now you have to illegally cross the double yellow line in order to go around the bicyclist. So you either are too close to the bicycle or you are crossing a double yellow.
But the federal program is Share the Road, and a lot of transportation funds in the states are dependent on whether you comply with a lot of those programs or not.
Well, then we need to put bike lanes in there and not make the driving lane the bike lane. I mean, when you have one and the same, it's just too dangerous for everybody.
It's just inherently unsafe. I agree 100%. But that's what I'm talking about. Like we need to look for opportunities and who pays for it. Well, I think there's a lot of cost sharing that ought to be happening. Development ought to be doing their part. Development, at least help with some of those things, or at least pay into a fund that does it. But to Larry's point, like, if I put money in that fund, you got 5 years to use it, or I want it back. I just don't think that's fair. So those are my pieces.
Does anyone, a little off key here, but does anyone know if there's if the tax from the sale of marijuana is passed, if that's already been marked.
You know, Patrick, there is a BPTA one, bicycle, pedestrian, whatever transit, that developers have to contribute to if they can't build bicycle, pedestrian, transit improvement.
At the county or the
County
city?
level, we
Not
put
the
it,
city.
I don't know.
It's like a fee and loop program.
No, well, it's not a fee and loop, you're
It
supposed
just
to.
started, right?
40 years ago.
Oh, I thought it just.
And we tried to find out what they're using the money for, and that, Patrick, it won't tell, all the transportation. But just so you know, there's an attempt made. That's
So-
better.
To that point, and, you know, harping on it, but of course, Drive, most of the land that gets developed is through the city, they do not have that. So there's no money going to public transportation. It sounds great for other parts of the county, but the group part of Region 7 doesn't benefit.
The problem is if there's no right of way, no development, forced to be extorted by a property owner that won't give up bike lane with. So that's when you're able to put the money in. It's not fee and loop it. If there's no other option.
Right, but I wonder what would happen if people thought about like the cars and the primary modality I'm supporting, right? I can make that 2 lanes and do everything I want, but they said it's a lane, a bike lane. So figure out how not to use your car. So I mean, those are choices. Those are cultural choices. Like the US, we use their cars. Like you could make a different choice in some areas. I'm not sure we need 2 lanes to go all the way down to the Bay Bridge. For instance. Like, it's not, and it's not. And that's that's like one of the few safe spots where the roads,
We can buy.
the shoulders are wide enough to feel safe.
But there are shocking I mean, you could go all the way down to Edgewood and it'd be good to get the facts out again. You know, over 40,000 commuters coming out of there. The numbers are huge. So to say, don't really need 2 lanes going down to Edgewood Road.
I'm not saying you don't need them, I'm
I'm
just
just
saying you can make a
saying
different choice.
Projecting 65,000 parts of that. And can they make another choice? Those people work outside of county, a lot of them. So they cannot walk to work. They
A lot of people
work
tell
in
me.
DC or, no, that's a lot of that's coming back too. You might be able to do a couple days, but I mean, I know everybody I know has to go back to the office, and that's Baltimore and DC and Fort Meade. And so it's not that easy for a great big part of the community. And it sounds great, but what's that percentage that could actually walk to work?
I don't know how many are familiar with Mountain Road between where Route 100 ends on Mountain Road, the Lake Shore area going towards Gibson Island.
Yeah.
But certain times of the day, they have it so that the traffic, certain lanes you can use going in,
Yes.
certain lanes you can use going out. And it sounds to me like that, by having that kind of,
Thinking about that.
that's to me, that's the only option that would work. Because of
You could use 3 instead of 4 now.
yes,
Still keep it away from bikes or
Yeah.
head.
but the thing is, having the stoplights, we're saying, you can use these 2 lanes going in the morning, these 2 come out. It helps with the traffic pattern based on the time of day.
It is a little pregnant.
We sit down and walk.
You're on the wrong line.
Yeah.
In DC, they don't even put a light up. It's like, you gotta know.
Yeah,
It's just like this lane and, and then you're driving down the road and it's like, I'm in the wrong lane.
Let's go ahead. Let's take about 15 minutes to get to the last
Yeah.
3 of you. Tony
Most of what I really have with
has been covered.
transportation and housing, great conversation. That's the other one, I think is still just it's always education. That's my weak spot. But also seeing that when we had contractors come before us to give us a bid, and the guys knew how to give a bid, even though they were lying. They couldn't sustain the contract after they got it. Okay, which means that now we have to go to the person who was the second highest bidder, who had a good bone, had a good record, but he was too high for the bidding process. So we get people who will give a bid and they can fulfill the contract. There needs to be something in place. Once people's prove what they can really do. Okay, because I saw it happen, a good example was what is now, it's the old Germantown School. Not the one on Cedar Park Road, the one used for the, Phoenix Town, yes, okay? And, the windows were a simple thing, you thought it was simple. The guy got the lowest bid, he got the contract, he was working 4 days at someplace else, and just one day at Phoenix Town, and couldn't fulfill the time of the bid, so we had to go to another person, and the person who was the second highest, and now this guy wants a higher bar. And so we have to have realistic numbers and realistic people to verify what they can really do, because this, okay, so we need realistic information on building the infrastructure.
How does that, I mean, it's not the first time the county built schools.
I'm sorry,
It's not the first time the county built schools.
I'm talking about I'm talking about mindset.
You're saying that. It's like, okay, it's the first time we built a school, the second time I got it. But like, county's been here for 100 years. Like,
Wouldn't you-
okay, here's a, how do they make this
Just give
mistake?
you a good example. You have building, you have remodeling, you have what I forgot. They all three sound like maybe a great option. People need the 13 hospitals. And so when we got, this is 2002, and I think at the time elementary cost 39, and high school was 60. And kids from probably going to Arundel and South River. And they were trying to find some viable way to make this work. They couldn't get an actual clear bid. The only thing they understood was put the Fort Indian at that time. You see how long now Crawford High School has just been built, right? So I'm saying that we need to have people who are really coming to the table, telling the truth, and also people who know that they're telling the truth or they're lying, because their track record doesn't support what they're saying. And so that's a problem that we're going to face with all that we're talking about right now, and developers right here. And it's how they can't fulfill it, but they want to get that big. And so the whole thing is, we have to have people around the table. These presentations are great. Okay, now let's verify that you can be good and do it based on what you're saying, what have you done? We just believe you.
So the county doesn't know that process. I mean,
They have the process. All I'm telling you is people come before you and make the truth.
oh, I understand, but if I were reviewing a contractor for a bid in my old job, they would have to provide me with performance history. And especially if I'm looking for someone who's going to do like work from, they're going to have to show me like performance plan.
That sounds great. But if you got a policy that you have to take those bids.
Oh, see, that's it.
problem.
Oh, right.
But you can
Yeah,
also,
but I would-
that doesn't the county notice you have to not only go through that, but you have to post a improvements bond. Right, and so the notion is you both theoretically protected if in fact that contractor can't perform what it does, you would then be able to go and access that bond, which
Still want
theoretically
somebody to
allow-
do the work.
Similar to the work, thing with the school, what Lil was saying about, county people more suburban, and they, you're within a mile of the school to be a walker. Okay, all the communities being built, so that can be a part of the reality. Okay, my granddaughter lives home, she goes to Bates Mill. She wanted to go to Annapolis High, Annapolis. She moves right now across my fence. Yeah, she moved to Annapolis Middle, that's just how messed up this, district. So my concern is just with everything we're saying, it's just that those who are responsible for going to state is not saying. Okay. Whether they finish, after we finish talking, and giving all of our advice, we're gonna find that we can't do what we say we're gonna do, or we're gonna have, and listen, every folks, we're gonna have a very, we call it back in case for their urban removal. And these contracts need to be required to build the affordable housing first before they build out the others. They're not required to do that. That's why you never see it.
You're talking about, it's interesting, you're talking about a whole different type of infrastructure. One thing is infrastructure for roads and pipes, and sewage and so forth. The other infrastructure in the county, to actually review bids, to either pull their inspectors down or to literally have a person whose role it is to authenticate and review everything. Buck stops with that.
Okay. What I'm saying is come right back to what you were saying earlier, the overall thing about how much it costs to go to California. Maybe a different part of the country, but the mindset is still the same thing. When they finish doing what they say they want to do, to make things what we want to live with 2040, you won't have we have a very white, we won't have a affordable. Okay? And that's just the reality of what we're surrounded.
Well, I like the idea of let's look at a successful affordable housing.
Yeah, let's see,
Project.
more than one, see.
Well, that would be great, because I think to Tony's point, I see a lot of development, no affordable housing.
They don't require it.
But yet everybody talks about the need, so.
So wouldn't building housing in general though, like, maybe not really address affordable housing crisis, but wouldn't it limit the, you know?
Well, more supply.
Yeah, but
Yes, that's
right.
the answer for everything.
Except like these townhomes that are going in, Parkside Preserve. Lots of townhomes coming in. The Stroud area, 600,000, a townhouse. And they're all like jammed in together on, guys are involved in it, it's a beautiful development, but I mean, that's out of, that's not affordable housing.
Yeah.
But that's what's coming in.
Right, but look at the model. Wanted to build 300 low-income houses. Worst possible scenario is that you. It's just lousy. You've seen 100 times. That is a recipe for. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, these become crime-ridden communities because, concentrated people with dire needs in areas where people don't want to be. So, I mean, I think the real solution to that is it's a requirement for every development to provide a percentage. The more they provide, better we go. And that's the model that people say.
But all that has to go into what is the code, the building
right.
code, the acceptance.
Well, and that's
Well,
what
that's
we
what
need.
we're saying, I don't think your model is saying, let's concentrate on low-income houses, back off of Clay Street, because I don't have to look at it. Cut the streets off with government money to make parking garages for the federal government, right? And the stories.
I know the story real well,
I'm
yeah.
just saying, that is, then people say, oh, they've redeveloped this and we've got more low-income housing there. It's in the same model. It's where we read the paper every day. So I think you really have to say, this has got to be, and this is our job, I think, is to say, that holds up and.
It's true for like Newtown 20 and how do the kids get out? I mean, they gotta go through Stride.
Walking the sidewalk, man.
It's
I made a very
dangerous,
strong
that's a
point about that.
dangerous section.
3 kids were walking, this actually happened, down Forest Drive. They're all the same age. This one girl looks like she's 4 years old, and she wants to look like she's 4 years old. And there's a building past 7-Eleven where this guy is a street hood. I'll put it that way. And he knows how to pick up girls and make them feel good about themselves. And these kids have to walk past this every day. Okay, and then you have the congested traffic, people are coming out in the mornings. But all one person has to do, I'm a paramedic also, I've seen everything. So the whole thing, all one person has to do is just walk home just for a split second. Their cars up on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Then we'll say what we should have done. There's too many variables that we have a possibility to do, but it's going to cost. What are we willing to pay? If we're willing to pay, who's it going to include for you to be a part of this? Who's it going to exclude? So this is a long, deep conversation. And look, I'm glad I have no more hair to lose. But this is a deep conversation. It's a lot to consider. And you need to have, I know these things just listening, but you need to have people like this. You need to have people for low income. You need to have, after we say, going to say this, students planning with us, because in 2040, I know how I'll be in 2040. Okay, but the kids who will be living there are not on this committee. I don't care if the county executive has a committee for youth. They're not on this committee. They need to be on all these adult committees because they're the ones who are going to be living or acting out or affected by what Alice says to them. Patrick, can I come back next week?
Let's make sure we get to.
We have 10 minutes.
We need a.
I've been interjecting the whole time, so I don't think there's anything that we haven't talked about except this concept of community benefit agreements. It's something that, I can bring articles in, but basically when the models used at the moment on very large developments, airports or just large city developments. And so that's not us, But I think a version of community benefit agreements should be used when any of the changes we do to zoning, so that you go back, to your point, you go back to the existing communities and you talk about what you're planning and you ask them, what is your vision of your community here? So it's kind of a very granular look at each area, even lower than what we're doing.
Mhm.
But maybe we would say, for these if we are gonna do mixed use or infill development, then there's some kind of radius and the communities have to achieve a community benefit agreement with this new zoning. And I have seen some other zoning, form-based zoning that incorporated community benefit agreements, so I will look for it to share.
Okay,
Just
thank you. Linda, anything more to add?
Along the same lines, so we listened to a lot of folks, but we were in that transit subcommittee or transportation subcommittee, and there are, and I see this up, the committee members, I believe, I didn't, sorry. There are like 100 cities in the United States that are currently looking at or have implemented some level of free transit. And that benefits the students. It benefits restaurant workers who may be able to drive to a park and ride if they do have a vehicle to get to downtown, where they don't have to pay for parking and are able to support their families through the restaurant service. I was in a restaurant, I won't name restaurants, but there were 3 people working in a 2-story restaurant last week because they can't get people to work because there's no place to park. And if you do park at the stadium, how long does it take you to get bus from the stadium to downtown? And even if they were parking in the parking structure that is no longer there, it still takes a lot of money out of their take-home pay. And so there are some solutions that are being developed by these cities, and I think we need to look at them, because a lot of Region 7, we have rural areas, but a lot of Region 7 is so tied to the city, there ought to be some type of a solution. And speaking of being tied to the city, we were talking in the beginning of the fact that, some of the on-demand bus availability that there is stops at the city, if it's the county. Stops at the city, dumps you off at a city bus stop, and then you wait for the next bus or whatever it may be. So whatever we have, it needs to be effective, it needs to be timely and reliable. And nobody wants to spend 2 hours on a bus pulling around the city to get 5 miles. I mean, that's just kind of crazy. Another thing, I think we talk about the word resiliency, and we always talk about that with this infrastructure, but I think it applies to everything. We need to really think about if we're doing housing, like 10 years from now. So how are we going to build in resiliency and make sure that if there is a storm, or whatever it may be, that property still continues to be protected at the same level as housing down the road that $750,000 the when I worked at Federal Highway Administration, our little catchphrase was you can't outbuild congestion. At some point in time, you have to dump that congestion into either a community or into the end of the road or whatever it may be. So I think that's something we always have to keep in our mind, because if we don't reduce the volume that the vehicles take or the vehicles themselves, then we're always going to have that situation. And with intelligent transportation systems technologies, what all of us have, well, I shouldn't say all of us, but a lot of us probably have a lane encouragement, keeps you in the lane if you turn in. And we have adaptable cruise control so that you can set your distance between vehicles. So as this technology becomes more common in the vehicles that are out there, and I don't mean the high-end cars and all the cars, what happens then is that allows us to shorten the distance between the vehicles safely. So then that starts to impact congestion, and it also helps with traffic control devices. And I keep thinking, I was in this for so many years, that I would never see an actual, the applications, but you know, we have the mirrors that let you know, we can have vehicles, incursion, keep you from leaving your lane unless you have your blinker on, and you get the haptic sensor motion. It says, oh, you're doing something really bad. And most of the time it means put down your cell phone and drive. But yeah. When we were in Colorado a couple months ago, we actually, and I worked on this like 10 years ago, we actually were approaching a intersection and my car, my heads up display started to tell me how many seconds it was until that light turned red. So with that, that reduces red light running or immediate stops where you get rear-ended. So that also helps to limit congestion and improve safety. So I know it took a long time to get Forest Drive, Bay Ridge lights synced and everything. I came here tonight, not a red light. I was so happy. Oh, like, so as we see some of these technologies, I would hope that the county would be prepared to move forward. I know Nestor and I had a conversation about that. But they have to have the funds to do it. And the vehicles are going to be available, as they already are, before the infrastructure.
Well, and
then
the intelligent signage is available too.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
vehicles and then
Yeah, absolutely.
road.
And Barry, if you were talking about like basically contra flow, you're talking about changing the flow of like the Bay Bridge. So a peak time, you switch the traffic. Well, those are things that can all be done based on the typical volume that day. It doesn't have to be constant. And, you know, so those are things that I think that, like that. You know, I get all wrapped up in that kind of thing because I've lived that life for so long. But the resiliency thing to me, I think it applies across everything. And we've talked about bus stops. We talked about bus stops. They may meet some guidelines, but I started looking at I'll never get the abbreviation right. What is it for disabilities? Thank you. I was looking at the schematics of what that entails, the size and the distance between the walls and the seats and everything. And then driving down the road, and I'm like, there's no way that could be. There's no way that. I'm gonna go out. I said this probably a month ago. I'm gonna go out with my little ruler and my tape measure and my camera, and I'm gonna look at some of these. And the other thing is that we talked about on this committee that none of us want to sit in those because wherever you're sitting, the rain and the storm is coming in that direction. But I saw one of the older ones that was like more like the wall with the door in the middle, the opening in the middle. Those were so much more protected than the new single, whatever they look like, they're molded out of plastic that the city put in. And the other day I was driving down and I saw a woman sitting on a stump behind one of these new ones rather than sitting in. She was literally, she had her bags and she was sitting on the edge of the stump rather than sitting in that. So there has to
Take a
be.
picture of that.
Yeah, if I see her again, right? Well, I was in traffic.
Would
So-
be, it would be hard to do a worse job. of this. Bus stop.
Oh my God, they look awful. And there's two seats in them. And I mean, the little bench, and you know, I would venture to say people are talking about the size of airplane seats. Trust me, those are not the size of airplane seats. So anyway, so basically that's I think that's all the little notes that I made. But when I was looking down the list, I think all of this, you know, community health is on all three of those, and I think all of this contributes to community health. So the community health is not just when we think of community health, it's not a community hospital, it's not fire, EMS, law enforcement, it's everything. It's transportation, it's how well we're able to sleep at night because we're not in an area where there's so much noise pollution, sleep or whatever that may be. And then we were talking also about how high if we start stacking units and the impact there on on needing additional ladder trucks and platforms and the ability to meet fire emergencies in those from those buildings. That's huge, and those things are expensive. And then you also have to have the manpower. I mean, a truck company is a six-person crew if it's actually outfitted.
So we're already 6 stories.
Yeah, but we're talking about if we're building higher, right? And in different areas.
Sure.
So what's the closest mutual aid station that has a ladder truck?
Ladder truck doesn't help you at 16 stories.
No, 16, no, I used to
It
tell
game's
people,
over after.
yeah, tell people when I went to hotel, I say, no higher than the 8th floor, please.
Another way to look at that is not looking at 16 stories. Looking at these single stories, mini strip malls and stuff, they could have 2 or 3
Yeah.
stories. And that would add thousands of units.
It would, but you still have to plan for having the necessary resources to. meet that.
Absolutely, but I'm saying as opposed to going,
Yeah, it's ridiculous. If you like growls and some of these strip centers, you see, it's like, why not have 3 levels? But the answer is because of parking.
The answer is parking.
Mhm.
the answer is what?
You'll trip parking. requirements. So what you need is a give from the county or the city on that.
To recognize shared parking.
In our experience, people are just using cars less. Like this is what we see in our business. Is, we're required to have all this parking in our places that it doesn't get used. So I've got extra blacktop, more runoff, doesn't get used. But I gotta do it to comply and check a box for the city.
I did have stormwater runoff on my roof.
But that's right, like parking requirements are not up to.
I think that's
Doesn't get used till the holidays. The holidays, right?
Parking requirements, which is destroying.
People use Uber, like all our young tenants are like under 30, maybe 60% have cars. I thought to provide parking.
Well, think about it though, we have these mixed use environments, they work so well for shared parking because the demand is for the tenants and what the day is for businesses and there's overlap between factor that we figured that all out. But that's why I like that model. So it's less demand infrastructure.
We need the county to give or the city to give.
The city's looking at it really hard right
And this shows hard data on some of that
now.
to prove that this is a lot of things.
No, I mean, if you go to the tables that are talking about traffic safety and parking requirements, that's all been done. That exists.
The comments. I don't
It's getting the city and the county to buy into it.
Together.
Yeah.
Any reduction of parking, neighbors go serve the city.
You could because they all have driveways and garages. So I don't understand.
My sidewalk, my street.
I can tell you.
Hey, Linda, I was gonna ask you, when you talking earlier about some cities, municipalities looking at free public transportation, I don't know. Questions if they've developed enough for those who have implemented it, has it increased ridership? And maybe it's too new where they haven't done it.
So I think what I was saying was that they have a healthy ridership. But they may have started out with grant funding, and so now they're looking for funding streams.
The city doesn't have. The city has a $2 Uber.
Yeah, it's a simple app.
Now, it's a $2 Uber now, it's available. And it still doesn't get used at a very high usage.
How many of those?
The city, I'll tell you, they've done the best. It's all over. Like a ton of cities.
Nice, the scooters too, I'm curious to see how that pilot program's going. That looks like a really good solution.
They leave them in the middle of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
That's also.
Eric shared some data on that, didn't he, at the last meeting?
Yeah, but what you see is different than, I mean, it's like wherever, and they have geofencing, so wherever you're riding, you run you get to the end of it. It's here for just off the road and walking on.
From spot,
What are the boundaries on that?
it's city, but now.
It's just the city.
Yeah, it's the city's sponsor. It's because they
Right
took away
outside.
parking at Gilman.
And they say that's underutilized.
My staff uses
First
it.
2 rides are free, it's great. You're downtown, just call the guy.
Right to City Hall, right?
Yeah.
I should have. Yeah.
Folks, we're right at, well, we're at a little bit after 8 o'clock. I don't want to keep you all too late. If I could say really quickly, so our next meeting, Leah, before you came in, our next meeting is going to be December 6th. And I would like to have a couple of volunteers, and I'll put a call out via email, but to work for an hour or two offline ahead of the meeting to develop a vision statement for our plan. We've got a survey that's out now that is wrapping up November 1st. We will have the data from that and from the prior questionnaires, and we can kind of look to see what we're hearing from the public and then help develop a vision statement. I'd like to work with a couple of people offline to do that because it's a very painful process to draft anything as a committee. So my thought is if we can have a few people to do, to draft something offline, we can bring it to the next meeting and it'd be a much easier process.
I'm willing.
Be willing? Okay. Is there anybody else? And I will put a call out on email as well, but
What is going to be?
we need to get together sometime, it'd be after November 1st, because that's when, so maybe the second week of November. Okay,
I'll make it.
okay, all right, we'll get in touch with you all, thank you. I think that's everything that I had. Is there anything I'm forgetting, Desiree?
I think so. We have conflict of interest forms there if you want to fill one out, hard copy and give it to us.
Can you send us a PDF map of Region 7?
We have that, yeah.
My apologies for being late tonight. But I held a meeting. I imagine you did all of the approval of the minutes and all that.
I did.
Oh my gosh.